He never thought a one-night mistake in Rome would follow him all the way back to America. But when Daniel stepped out of the cab, his son clutching his fingers tightly, and saw Adrian standing there in front of his grand house, he knew there was no turning back. Daniel Pierce had promised himself he would never look back. Rome was supposed to be a blur, a distant chapter burned into the pages of memory. Yet, the memory had grown arms and legs, a pair of hazel eyes, and now called him Daddy. The child was the undeniable proof of a night Daniel had tried to forget. Adrian Ross, the man standing frozen before him, was still every bit as magnetic as he'd been that night in Romeo, man born for spotlight and applause. The designer whose name graced the most coveted runways of the world, whose sharp tongue could silence a critic, and whose smile had once melted Daniel in the back of a candlelit cafe near the Tiber River. Now Adrian wasn't smiling. His jaw was tight, his perfect posture faltering, his eyes fixed on the boy at Daniel's side. Daniel! His voice cracked. Adrian Ross never cracked. The boy, Caleb, peeked out from behind Daniel's coat, shy but curious. Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to run, to take Caleb and disappear into the safety of anonymity. But that wasn't why he was here. He had made a promise to his son Caleb would know where he came from. And whether Adrian wanted it or not, this was part of Caleb's story. Daniel remembered Rome with a clarity that bordered on cruelty. The trip had been for Warken Architecture Conference, a chance to present his firm's latest project. He had been exhausted, overwhelmed, too many glasses of wine under the spell of the Eternal City's night sky. Adrian had been there too, giving a lecture about the intersection of design and human emotion. One careless night, one surrender, one unforgettable collision of two worlds that should never have crossed. Daniel had left Rome without so much as a goodbye, burying the encounter under the rubble of guilt and impossibility. Months later, when the sickness began, when the doctors explained the impossible that he could carry life, Daniel had been shattered, terrified, alone. But Caleb had changed everything. Caleb was laughter in the quiet, hope in the ruins. Caleb was love. Now, standing on Adrian's doorstep in New York, Daniel's stomach twisted. He had rehearsed this moment countless times during sleepless nights. None of those rehearsals had prepared him for Adrian's eyes, the mix of disbelief and something rawer, almost afraid. Adrian stepped closer. His polished shoes clicked against the driveway. The man who once commanded entire runways now looked uncertain, his voice barely above a whisper. Is he? Adrian's gaze flickered between Daniel and Caleb. Mine! Daniel swallowed hard. He's ours. The silence was unbearable. A bird flew overhead, its wings slicing the sky. Caleb shifted, gripping Daniel's hand tighter. For the first time in years, Daniel saw Adrian stripped of his armor, the arrogance, the fame, the untouchable glamour. Here stood a man staring at a truth he couldn't control. Inside, the house smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Adrian poured himself a drink with hands that trembled slightly. Daniel sat across from him, Caleb tucked close. You should have told me, Adrian said finally, his tone low but sharp. Daniel bristled, and said what? That the man I barely knew, the one who walked away without asking my number, was about to become a father? That I was carrying a child that shouldn't have been possible in the first place? You would have laughed in my face. Adrian's eyes darkened. You think I would have laughed at my own son? The words stung. Daniel's defenses wavered, but he couldn't afford to crumble. You didn't give me a reason to believe otherwise. Adrian set the glass down with a sharp click, then leaned back, rubbing a hand across his jaw. He looked tired, older than Daniel remembered. And yet you came here. Why? Daniel lowered his gaze to Caleb, who was playing with a toy car he had pulled from his pocket. His voice softened. Because he deserves the truth. He deserves to know where he comes from, even if it complicates everything. Adrian's stare lingered on the boy. Something broke in his expression: pride, fear, longing, all tangled together. For once, the great Adrian Ross had no script, no lines to hide behind. Daniel's chest tightened. This was the man who had turned his world upside down once before. Now, he might do it all over again. And the scariest part was Daniel wasn't sure if he wanted to stop him. Adrian had never been afraid of anything, at least not publicly. Fear was for amateurs, for people who couldn't control the narrative. He'd built his empire on perfection, on never letting anyone see him falter. Yet here he was, staring at a child who shared his eyes, his expression, even the stubborn set of his mouth. Every instinct screamed at him to deny it, to protect the carefully crafted image of Adrian Ross, the man who ruled fashion. But when Caleb lifted his gaze, shy but bold, Adrian felt his defenses crumble. It was like staring at a living mirror of all the choices he'd never meant to make. Daniel watched him carefully, his own posture rigid. He wasn't here to beg. He wasn't here to rekindle something. He was here because Caleb deserved to know. "You've got my eyes," Adrian said finally, the words strangled, unpolished. He leaned back into the leather sofa, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for years. Daniel's lips pressed together. He didn't answer, because the truth was written all over Caleb's face. Silence filled the room. Only the ticking of a designer clock on the wall broke it, mocking them with every passing second. Caleb climbed onto Daniel's lap and whispered, "Daddy, can we go home now?" The word home was a knife. Daniel's arms tightened around his son. He wanted to leave, to run from the hurricane in Adrian's eyes. But he stayed seated because a part of him knew that if they left now, Caleb would lose something vital. Adrian's voice softened unexpectedly. "Do you live far?" Daniel hesitated. "Brooklyn. Small apartment. Enough for us." Something in Adrian's expression twisted. He looked around his house, vast and immaculate, filled with things but void of warmth. Then he looked back at the boy, his boy, who had been raised without any of it. "Does he?" Adrian stopped, searching for the words. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. "Does he know about me?" Daniel shook his head. "Only that you're someone important. I didn't think it was fair to tell him more until I knew if you even wanted to be part of his life." The weight of that landed like stone between them. Adrian, always in control, suddenly felt powerless. He wanted to argue, to demand why Daniel had kept this from him. But the truth was, he hadn't given Daniel a reason to believe in him. That night in Rome had been careless. Adrian had been drawn to Daniel's quiet brilliance, his boyish laugh, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about buildings as if they were living things. Adrian had chased beauty all his life, but with Daniel, he'd found something more dangerous: sincerity. And it had terrified him. So he had done what he always did: run. And now, here was the consequence. A child. A life. A chance he never knew he wanted, staring him in the face. Later, when Daniel tucked Caleb into Adrian's guest room, he lingered by the bedside. The boy clutched his toy car, his lashes heavy with sleep. "You okay, buddy?" Daniel whispered. Caleb yawned. "The house is too big. I don't like it." Daniel smiled faintly, stroking his son's hair. "It's just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll go home." But as he said it, his chest tightened. Because leaving wasn't that simple anymore. When he closed the door, Adrian was waiting in the hall, his hands in his pockets, his face unreadable. "Stay a few days," Adrian said, his tone more request than command. Daniel blinked. "That's not a good idea." Adrian's gaze sharpened. "Why not? He's my son too." The words hit Daniel like a physical force. He had imagined Adrian saying them 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways. But now, hearing them out loud, his heart twisted. "He doesn't even know you," Daniel said quietly. "You can't just step in and expect." "I don't expect anything." Adrian cut him off, his voice low, rough around the edges. "But I want to try. Don't shut me out of this." Daniel searched his face, looking for insincerity, for the polished arrogance Adrian was known for. Instead, he saw something raw, something real, and it scared him more than anything else. The next morning, Caleb woke early. He wandered into the kitchen to find Adrian, dressed down for the first time Daniel had ever seen him. No tailored suit, no glossy perfection, just a plain white t-shirt and sweatpants. Caleb froze, clutching his toy car. Adrian turned, startled, then crouched down to eye level. Morning, champ. Caleb tilted his head, suspicious. Who are you? Adrian hesitated. His empire had given him 100 titles: designer, genius, icon. But none of them fit now. He cleared his throat. I'm Adrian, a friend of your daddy's. Caleb studied him with the brutal honesty only children had. You look weird in pajamas. Adrian laughed, the sound surprising even himself. I suppose I do. Daniel, standing in the doorway, watched the exchange with a pang of something he couldn't name. Adrian, the man who could silence critics with a glance, was fumbling in front of a 5-year-old. And somehow it was endearing. Over the next days, tension and tenderness collided under Adrian's roof. He tried to connect with Caleb, awkward at first, then gradually more natural. He learned the boy's favorite cartoons, sat through endless questions about dinosaurs, and even burned pancakes trying to make breakfast. Daniel found himself caught between admiration and fear. He had built a life on protecting Caleb, shielding him from pain. Letting Adrian in meant risking everything. One evening, after Caleb had fallen asleep, Adrian and Daniel sat on the balcony, city lights shimmering below. The air was heavy with unsaid words. You think I can't do this? Adrian said quietly, breaking the silence. Daniel sipped his wine, avoiding his gaze. You don't know what this life is like. The sleepless nights, the responsibility. You live in a world of cameras and schedules. Caleb needs stability, not chaos. Adrian's jaw tightened. I've built everything I have from chaos. Don't tell me I can't fight for my son. Daniel looked at him then, really looked. The fire in Adrian's eyes wasn't the arrogance of a celebrity. It was the desperation of a man terrified of losing what he never knew he wanted. And that scared Daniel most of all. Because if Adrian truly wanted this, if he truly fought for it, Daniel didn't know if he could keep his own heart safe. But it wasn't just Daniel's heart at stake anymore. It was Caleb's. And as the days turned into weeks, the lines between past wounds and present hopes blurred. Daniel caught himself laughing with Adrian, remembering Rome, remembering the way his heart had once raced under that same gaze. He told himself it was dangerous. He told himself it was temporary. But when Adrian tucked Caleb in one night, reading him a bedtime story with a softness Daniel had never imagined, he realized the truth he'd been running from. This wasn't temporary. It never had been. The news broke before Daniel could even catch his breath. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. Had been careful, always careful. No public outings, no cameras, no appearances that might connect him or Caleb to Adrian Ross. But fame had a way of creeping into places it didn't belong, and Adrian's name was the kind that drew attention wherever it went. One grainy photograph, taken outside a cafe in Brooklyn, was enough. Adrian bending down to tie Caleb's shoe while Daniel stood beside them, laughing. It wasn't a family portrait, but the world saw it as one. By morning, the tabloids screamed, Adrian Ross's secret family? Daniel's phone buzzed nonstop with calls from his firm, from friends, from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Caleb's school sent a polite but firm message asking for clarification about his guardianship. But the worst part wasn't the chaos outside. It was the look in Caleb's eyes when he asked, Daddy, why are people taking pictures of us? Did we do something bad? Daniel had no answer. His throat locked, his arms tightening around his son, as if he could shield him from the entire world. Adrian, on the other hand, reacted with a fury Daniel had never seen. He stormed into his office, barking orders to his PR team, shredding every headline that dared to use Caleb's face without permission. They don't get to touch him, Adrian snapped, pacing like a caged animal. Not one picture, not one word. I'll ruin every paper that prints his name. Daniel stood in the doorway, torn between admiration and terror. Adrian, you can't control everything. Adrian whirled on him, eyes blazing. Watch me. That night, the argument came. You think you can just fight the entire world into submission? Daniel hissed, pacing the guest room where they'd been hiding from reporters camped outside. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Caleb doesn't deserve to be dragged into your circus. Adrian slammed his hand against the wall, his composure shattering. He's not just yours, Daniel. He's mine too. Do you think I wanted this? The headlines, the cameras? I didn't choose it, but I'll be damned if I let them scare me away from him. Daniel's voice broke. And when it gets worse, when they start digging into my life, when Caleb is cornered at school, when people start questioning if I'm even fit to raise him. You don't get it, Adrian. You'll always have money, lawyers, power. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Adrian's voice dropped, low and dangerous. He stepped closer, his breath ragged. Don't you dare act like you're less. You gave him life. You gave him love. That makes you stronger than I'll ever be. The words cut through Daniel's anger, leaving him trembling. He had come ready to fight, to protect. But Adrian's voice wasn't arrogance this time, it was desperation, raw and unfiltered. For a moment, they stood chest to chest, breathing hard, staring at each other as if the weight of 5 lost years pressed between them. Daniel hated himself for noticing the way Adrian's eyes flicked to his lips, for remembering the taste of wine and Rome's night air. He hated the way his body leaned forward instinctively, traitor to the walls he'd built. But when Caleb's soft voice called from the other room, "Daddy," Adrian, the moment shattered like glass. They pulled apart. The following days were a blur of chaos. Reporters shadowed their every step. Daniel's firm quietly suggested he take a leave of absence. Their polite way of saying his presence was now a liability. His landlord complained about the press outside the building, neighbors whispering in hallways. Daniel had always prided himself on resilience, but the weight was crushing. One night, after Caleb had finally fallen asleep, Daniel stood at the window of Adrian's penthouse, staring at the skyline. "Do you regret it?" Adrian's voice came from behind him. Daniel didn't turn. "Regret what?" "Coming here. Telling me." Daniel's hands tightened on the railing. "Every day feels like a mistake. But then Caleb smiles at you like he did this morning. And I can't regret that." Silence stretched between them. The city glowed beneath, alive and unbothered by their turmoil. Adrian moved closer, his reflection appearing beside Daniel's in the glass. "I can fix this. Not the past, but the future." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You think life is a runway, Adrian, that you can stage it, control it, make it beautiful again. But this is real, messy, ugly." Adrian's hand brushed his arm, tentative, almost afraid. "It's also worth it." Daniel turned finally, meeting those stormy eyes. "And what about us? Was it ever worth it?" Adrian didn't answer with words. His lips pressed to Daniel's before he could breathe. A kiss that carried every regret, every unsaid confession, every lonely night since Rome. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was desperate, broken, alive. And Daniel let himself fall. But love, Daniel knew, was never enough to silence the world. The backlash grew uglier. Rumors twisted into accusations. Adrian Ross's secret child became scandalous affair. Tabloids questioning Caleb's legitimacy, whispering about Daniel's career, his finances, his ability to raise a child at all. Daniel shielded Caleb as best he could, but the cracks showed. The boy grew quiet, anxious. Once he asked, "Am I a secret?" And Daniel nearly broke in two. Adrian fought back, calling press conferences, giving carefully worded interviews, declaring Caleb his son. But the more he fought, the more the spotlight burned. Finally, Daniel reached his breaking point. One evening, after Caleb had been tucked into bed at Adrian's penthouse, Daniel packed their bags. Adrian walked in as he zipped the suitcase. "What are you doing?" Adrian's voice was sharp, panicked. Daniel straightened, his eyes wet but steady. "I'm taking him home, away from this madness, away from cameras, interviews, gossip. He deserves a childhood, Adrian, not a headline." Adrian crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing his arm. "Don't you dare take him from me. Not after everything." Daniel's voice cracked. "I'm not taking him from you. I'm protecting him. And if you love him, if you love either of you, you'll let me." Adrian's grip loosened, his face breaking in ways Daniel had never seen. The man who had once been untouchable, who had ruled with flawless confidence, now looked utterly defeated. His whisper barely carried across the space between them. "Don't leave me again." Daniel's chest heaved, torn in half. "Then fight for us differently. Not with headlines. With love. With patience. With being here quietly, consistently. That's what Caleb needs. That's what I need." Adrian's eyes burned, but he nodded slowly. The first time in his life he'd surrendered control. Daniel reached for the suitcase, his hands trembling. And for the first time since Rome, Adrian didn't stop him. He simply whispered, "Come back to me." Daniel carried Caleb out of the penthouse that night, away from the blinding lights, into the quiet of Brooklyn. But even as the cab pulled away, even as he told himself this was the right choice, his heart ached with the weight of Adrian's voice echoing in his chest, because he knew he would come back. The only question was when. Weeks passed. Brooklyn's rhythm returned slowly, like a song Daniel had almost forgotten the words to. The paparazzi, always hungry for fresher scandals, shifted their attention elsewhere. Caleb laughed again, louder now, freer. And Daniel told himself he had done the right thing. Yet at night, when the city hummed beyond his apartment walls, he caught himself staring at the empty space beside him. The one that used to be filled by memories of Adrian, his laugh, his touch, his unbearable intensity. He told himself it was over, but the truth whispered otherwise. Because every morning, without fail, a small envelope arrived in his mailbox. Inside, sketches. Always signed with a hurried A. The first was of a building, clean lines and curves that mirrored Daniel's own architectural style. The second, a child's dinosaur doodled clumsily beside a couture gown. The third, a family, 3 figures, hand in hand, faceless but unmistakable. Daniel kept them hidden in a drawer, but sometimes Caleb found them. He would hold up the sketches and ask softly, "Did Adrian draw this for me?" And Daniel couldn't lie. He would smile and whisper, "Yes, for us." One rainy evening, a knock rattled the door. Daniel froze, heart leaping. When he opened it, Adrian stood there soaked through, clutching nothing but a small suitcase and a trembling kind of hope in his eyes. "I couldn't stay away," Adrian admitted, his voice raw. "I tried. God, I tried. But Daniel, I don't want the cameras. I don't want the headlines. I just want you. Both of you." Daniel stared at him, torn between anger and relief. "You think you can just walk back in? After everything?" Adrian's lips curved in a sad smile. "No, I think I have to earn it. And I will. Even if it takes the rest of my life." Before Daniel could reply, Caleb's small footsteps pattered across the floor. He peeked out from behind his father, eyes wide. "Adrian?" he whispered. Adrian crouched instantly, his soaked clothes clinging to him, his hands trembling as he opened his arms. "Yeah, buddy. It's me." Caleb hesitated only a moment before launching forward, burying his face in Adrian's chest. Adrian held him tight, eyes closing, his entire body shaking with the weight of a love he had almost lost. Daniel watched, something breaking open inside him. He saw not the designer, not the celebrity, but simply a man flawed, desperate, human clinging to their son as if he were the only thing keeping him alive. And Daniel realized he couldn't fight it anymore. The weeks that followed were different. Adrian didn't try to dazzle. He didn't stage press releases or call photographers. Instead, he came quietly. He cooked clumsy breakfasts in Daniel's tiny kitchen. He walked Caleb to school, carrying his backpack even when it didn't match his designer suits. He sat with Daniel on the couch, their shoulders brushing, silence stretching comfortable and full. He was present. And slowly, painfully, Daniel's walls lowered. One night, after Caleb had fallen asleep, they sat on the fire escape, the city glowing beneath them. Adrian reached for Daniel's hand, hesitant. Daniel didn't pull away. "I don't know if I can forgive everything," Daniel whispered. Adrian nodded. "I don't need forgiveness. I just need a chance." Daniel turned, meeting his gaze. And for the first time, he let himself believe. The kiss that followed wasn't desperate like before. It wasn't a clash of anger and regret. It was gentle, steady, promise. Months later, the world learned the truth. Not from tabloids, not from whispers, but from Adrian himself. At a press event, cameras flashing, he stood tall and unshaken. "Yes," he said, voice strong. "I have a son. His name is Caleb, and he is the best thing I've ever created." The room erupted, questions flying, reporters shouting. But Adrian didn't waver. He shielded his family, not by hiding them, but by owning them, standing proud in the light. And Daniel, watching from the wings with Caleb's hand in his, felt the final pieces click into place. They were no longer a secret. They were a family. The last scene unfolded not under spotlights, not in penthouses or crowded streets, but on a quiet summer afternoon. The three of them sat in a small park in Brooklyn, the grass warm beneath them. Caleb ran in circles, chasing fireflies, his laughter ringing out. Daniel leaned against Adrian, his head resting on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss Rome?" he asked softly. Adrian chuckled, pressing a kiss to Daniel's hair. Rome was beautiful, but it was nothing compared to this. Daniel closed his eyes, letting the warmth of Adrian's arm around him sink in, letting the sound of Caleb's laughter carry him forward. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel terrifying. It felt possible. And as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold, Daniel whispered the truth he had buried too long. "I love you." Adrian's grip tightened, his voice trembling but sure. "I've been waiting to hear that since Rome." The city hummed around them, life carrying on, indifferent. But in that moment, on that patch of grass, under the fading light, three lives had stitched themselves together into something unbreakable. A love reborn, family whole, at last. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.